I believe it's really important to understand that environmental health is profoundly local. Food safety is profoundly local. The decisions that each of us make as individuals around food safety are critically important to the health status of us and our families and our communities and the region writ large.
CDC estimates that 1 in 6 Americans get foodborne illness every year. And the cost of those foodborne illnesses are estimated at $15 billion. And CDC also estimates that if we can reduce these infections by just 10%, we can save 5 million people from getting sick every year. And that's a lot of missed school and work that we could prevent if we could reduce foodborne illness infections.
The Collaborative is a group of 4 nationally recognized associations that have a vested interest in public health and retail food safety that have joined forces with 2 regulatory agencies, the Food and Drug Administration and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, to work on a variety of initiatives that are designed to reduce foodborne illness in the U.S. The national associations that are part of the Collaborative are the Association of Food and Drug Officials, the Conference for Food Protection, the National Association of County and City Health Officials, and the National Environmental Health Association.
The collaborative really advances food safety by bringing together some of the best minds, whether it be from regulators, the federal agencies, or even the industry, to come together and think about how we might solve some of these fundamental challenges to retail food safety.
Hello and welcome to the Collaborative Ribbon Cutting. My name is Laura Wilde. I'm the Senior Program Analyst in Food Safety at NEHA, and I'm one of several collaborative representatives that you'll be hearing from today. You might be wondering, what is the collaborative? Well, that's what today is all about. First, I'll provide some background information on the collaborative, including how it got started. And then we'll show you a video where you'll hear from some of the leaders and visionaries behind this group. They'll explain what the collaborative does, how we do it, and what our vision is for the future. Following this video, we'll move into a live chat where we'll talk more about our projects. Please ask questions throughout the duration of this event using the chat function in the YouTube live stream. Members of the collaborative and our partners will be active in the chat and answer as many questions as possible. Visit the collaborative website to see our virtual program. Please note, this event is being recorded. We will make the recording available for future views on the collaborative website. This site is our central hub for all things collaborative. Check out our website to view things like news and events, toolkits, resources, funding opportunities, and the many projects the collaborative is working on. Be sure to check out the website, particularly the newest edition, the Food Code Adoption Toolkit, a helpful resource including the how-tos of FDA food code adoption with an abundance of useful information all at your fingertips. So let's dive in. In the fall of 2018, leaders from FDA with a vested interest in bending the curve of foodborne illness at the retail level held meetings with the leadership of the several associations that work in the food safety arena. Conversations began around what we could do to really make an impact on food safety. Over the course of the year, conversations continued and the ideas evolved. This finally led to the first ever Retail Food Regulatory Association Summit in the summer of 2019. This meeting set forth strategic goals, both short-term and long-term, to reduce the incidence of foodborne illness. The collaborative is comprised of the following associations and agencies: the Association of Food and Drug Officials, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Conference for Food Protection, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the National Association of County and City Health Officials, and the National Environmental Health Association. We have come together to reduce the incidence of foodborne illness. Our work focuses on adoption of the latest editions of the Food Code, improved food safety culture, increased enrollment, active participation, and conformance with the voluntary National Retail Food Regulatory Program standards, improved foodborne illness outbreak investigation, improved food safety management systems at regulated facilities, and effective communications to share our best practices amongst retail food production partners. This couldn't be a more exciting time for the industry, particularly in food safety. We've brought together leaders in the food safety arena to come together to leverage their collective resources, tools, ideas, brain power to get us where we need to be in food safety. For the first time, these associations are coming together to work hand in hand to reduce the incidence of foodborne illness. That's exciting. We're about to really make an impact. I often find myself thinking about what I can do individually and personally to really impact public health. What can I do to bend the curve of foodborne illness? And when I think about that, I think about all of the other great people, all of the other like-minded people, all of the other experts, all of the other people that are passionate about what they do. Imagine if we brought all of that passion, all of that knowledge, all of that expertise into one room. Imagine if we put our heads together, what could we accomplish? That's the nature of the collaborative. That's what we're here to do. For the first time, members from these associations are working together, hand in hand, for one goal, the reduction of foodborne illness. It's pretty exciting to think what we can do together. So with your help, we're going to make a difference. Now that you've had an inspirational crash course in the collaborative, it's my pleasure to share with you the following video. Please enjoy.
The fact that each of us needs to eat for nourishment each day is a tether that keeps us together. And what could be more important than ensuring that that tether is strong, it's sound, and it's firm?
The collaborative is a vision that many have had over the years. It's a group of public health focused, passionate leaders of the regulatory retail food safety community in this country. We are aligning each of our strengths to bend the curve on the occurrence of foodborne illness within the retail food segment of the industry.
Well, the Collaborative is a group of 4 nationally recognized associations that have a vested interest in public health and retail food safety that have joined forces with 2 regulatory agencies, the Food and Drug Administration and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, to work on a variety of initiatives that are designed to reduce foodborne illness in the U.S. The national associations that are part of the Collaborative are the Association of Food and Drug Officials, the Conference for Food Protection, the National Association of County and City Health Officials, and the National Environmental Health Association.
We are excited to begin work on all the different projects the associations are working together on because all of this will result in safer food. This includes developing a national food code adoption strategy and releasing a food code adoption toolkit, improving the approach, competency, and food safety culture within the regulatory community, increasing enrollment, engagement, and conformance in the retail program standards, improving foodborne outbreak investigation methods, increasing the number of establishments that have well-developed and implemented food safety management systems, and developing a strategy to enhance communication and better tell our collective story.
The collaborative really advances food safety by bringing together some of the best minds, whether it be from regulators, the federal agencies, or even the industry, to come together and think about how we might solve some of these fundamental challenges to retail food safety.
I think the greatest challenge that we've always had is getting the maximum out of the limited resources we have available. And I think through this collaboration, we are able to develop a synergy that enables us to all do more and collectively have a much greater impact than any of the associations would have been able to achieve individually.
It's very important to industry members as far as providing safe foods to customers, which are also our friends, our neighbors, our relatives. And so if we can improve conditions and knowledge in the United States about what causes foodborne illness, how to prevent foodborne illness, and how to educate and get information out to not only our regulators in the industry and our customers, we're all better off for it.
Food safety impacts us all. We all eat. Further, all of us get food from restaurants, grocery stores, institutions, and other locations that are regulated by retail food safety programs at the state, local, tribal, and territorial level. The SLTT food safety staff are on a daily basis reducing the potential for foodborne illness. And this is really what public health is all about, stopping illness at the lowest level possible.
78% of local departments have provided regulation, inspection, or licensing services at food service establishments just in the past year. indicating that retail food safety is an essential public health service.
CDC estimates that 1 in 6 Americans get foodborne illness every year. And the cost of those foodborne illnesses are estimated at $15 billion. And CDC also estimates that if we can reduce these infections by just 10%, we can save 5 million people from getting sick every year. And that's a lot of missed school and work that we could prevent if we could reduce foodborne illness infections.
I believe it's really important to understand that environmental health is profoundly local. Food safety is profoundly local. Think about it. No one eats at the federal level. No one eats at the state level. They eat at the local level. They eat in their school cafeterias. They eat in their home kitchens. If you're in the military, you eat in your local mess hall. The decisions that each of us make as individuals around food safety are critically important to the health status of us and our families and our communities and the region writ large.
The collaborative supports a more robust engagement in the priority setting for the entire retail food safety system. The early stakeholder engagement helps to ensure the right priorities are being chosen and that most benefit the state, local, tribal, and territorial food safety programs that are responsible for regulating at the retail level. In addition, it promotes collaboration amongst all the regulatory associations, which can only further advance retail food safety.
This is a special time in history. We are establishing a foundational legacy for retail food regulatory partners in this country. This is the beginning of a new era of collective efforts in collaboration.
The benefits of becoming involved is that, number one, you receive intelligence as it develops through the work of the collaborative. Number two, you are provided best practice. What are the emerging knowledge, skills, and abilities that will inform retail food safety moving into the future? It's being part of a network of people committed to retail food safety in the United States. It is the best thinkers and doers, and who wouldn't want to be a part of that? I think the benefits of participation and association with the collaborative are profound.
This collaborative also allows us to have a seat at the table and discuss very important objectives to help the collaborative meet its goals and therefore improve food safety and also reduce foodborne illnesses in the United States.
I'm inspired that there is not a better time than now to have impacts in retail food protection. The work of the collaborative is directly contributing towards the goals of the new era for smarter food safety, modernization of traditional retail food safety approaches. I am excited for the collaborative to be a partner in this national retail food safety platform together.
Each of us has an important role to play in retail food safety, but we are much stronger together when we can align our message and align our efforts and align our work and speak in a common voice. And this is where the collaborative really shines. And this is a once in a professional lifetime opportunity to work shoulder to shoulder with our counterparts in the public health enterprise to do something that's profoundly important for communities everywhere, for families everywhere, for parents everywhere. And that is to ensure that the food that you put in your baby's mouth is safe, it's wholesome, and it's nourishing.
Well, we certainly hope you enjoyed this sneak peek, and we're excited to dive more into the details during this live discussion. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our speakers today. Brenda Bacon is the Vice Chair of the Conference for Food Protection and the Director of Quality Assurance at Harris Teeter LLC. From the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, we have Dr. Laura Brown, Section Lead of the Safe Food Team with the National Center for Environmental Health. Dr. David T. Dijak is Chief Executive Officer of the National Environmental Health Association. From the Food and Drug Administration, we have Lori Farmer, Director of the Office of State Cooperative Programs. Our representative from the National Association of County and City Health Officials is Jennifer Lee, the Senior Advisor of Programs. Stephen Mondernock is the Executive Director of the Association of Food and Drug Officials, and Dr. David McSwain is the Executive Director of the Conference for Food Protection. Today's discussion will be facilitated by Michelle DiMaggio, a Supervising Environmental Health Specialist with Contra Costa County Health Services Department, Environmental Health Division in California. Michelle is also a National Environmental Health Association Region 2 Vice President. Michelle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us today in our live streamed event. As Laura mentioned earlier, during this discussion, we want to make it a live discussion. We want to make it feel like you're actually here with us. So please feel free to ask questions at any time during this discussion, and while I ask questions, using the chat feature in the YouTube. And again, we do have plenty of people in the background in the collaboration that are active and waiting for your questions. So in starting, let's go ahead and start with Dr. Dijak, if you don't mind if I ask you first. So how did you get involved with the collaboration? How did the collaboration get started? And what was your role in it?
Michelle, I hope it's okay if I kind of backdate myself just a little bit, because I was bought into the collaborative even before it was a collaborative. And let me explain. It was, think about this, 2001. I'm an academic and I'm seated in my office when the phone rings. And it was the dean's secretary. And she wanted to know if I could come to the dean's office right now. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? That is never a good sign when a university dean wants to talk to you. So I trundled down to the dean's office, and I went into her office. It was a very serious kind of atmosphere. I mean, it was incredible. And she's like, Dave, I've got a favor to ask of you. And I'm like, okay, where is this leading? The bottom line was this. UCLA, UC Berkeley, San Diego State University, and the University of Hawaii, together with my university, Loma Linda University in Southern California, have been funded by the federal government to work in a collaborative to build the capacity of the public health workforce in the Western United States and the Pacific Rim. And everyone was fighting. The budget wasn't being spent. There was backstabbing. People were competing for different speaking assignments. It was a real ugly mess. And the federal government intervened and said, enough. All of you on the West Coast are going to lose your resources unless you change things. And I was, I suppose, Mr. Fix-It at that point in time at Loma Linda. So they dispatched me to work with this group. And it turns out other deans made the same decisions. There were new players brought in. And to be honest with you, that was probably the halcyon days of the training center out there on the West Coast of the United States. We ended up having programs from Oklahoma in the East to Palau and Guam in the West. And we were bound by some central kind of commitments to each other. We had a common mission, shared values, a common pool of resources, and perhaps most importantly, we shared credit whenever something went well. And frankly, we trained thousands of people. And so when John Marcello approached me in 2016, John is with the FDA, and said, I've got this idea for a collaborative, I was bought in even before he got to the end of his pitch to me. We are committed to this group, to all the associations, AFDO, CFP, NACCHO. And when we began to meet back in 2018, we were joined by Vince Radke and Eric Bradley, and we met together in Rockville, Maryland, on our own dime, committed to the proposition that we could bend the arc of foodborne illness in the United States. And it's one of our great privileges to work with each and every one of the people that happen to be on this program this afternoon. The country is a better place because of their commitment, because of their passion, because of their education and training. And frankly, and I think this is the most important point, everyone brings a specialty. Each of the groups I just mentioned brings something special to the equation. And it's those places where NACHO and NEHA and AFTO and CFP, where we collide, if you will, that's where the action is. Most of us will not make great progress within our own given profession, our own individual discipline. But where we will make tremendous progress is where we collide with other associations, where we collaborate with other groups in the spirit of a common mission, the spirit of sharing resources, and in a spirit of giving credit to each other. And this is the secret sauce that FDA has created out of their national network and their home office there in Rockville. They should be widely applauded for creating this thing. And I think we have the greatest potential in my lifetime of bending the arc of foodborne illness in the contemporary era. And I hope that kind of gives you our sense of NEHA's perspective. It's a privilege to be here. It's an honor to be here. And it's an honor to share this afternoon's webcast with such an esteemed group.
Thank you, Dr. Dijak. Thanks for starting us off on that. I'd like to bring in Jennifer Lee. Do you have anything that you would like to add to that?
Thanks so much, Michelle. Just building off of Dave Dijak's comments, we really centered our initial conversations on building stronger relationships, as he mentioned, and so really honing in on the strengths that each of us bring to the table as collaborative members, and building it out from there, how we can improve the reduction of foodborne illness across the country. And it is really that sentiment that really resonates, I believe, with all of the collaborative members.
Thank you, Jennifer. And so we'll go ahead, if nobody else has anything to chime in, I'll go ahead and start with the next question. Dr. McSwain, I have a lengthy question for you if you're ready.
I'm ready, Michelle.
All right. So what are some of the strengths of the collaborative, specifically given the immense pressure that have been put on the food safety and environmental health professions as a whole during COVID-19?
Well, I guess it would be somewhat simplistic to say we maybe couldn't have found a better time to look for new directions and new strategies for food safety, because as I'm sure everyone who's viewing this presentation knows, COVID-19 has affected all of us, some of us in some cases personally, but certainly most of us professionally. Regulators and food industry professionals alike have had to find new and better ways to sustain the high standards of food safety that have become very commonplace and we are accustomed to in this country, as well as our consumers demand. And certainly this has posed significant challenges for us. Manpower and fiscal resources in the regulatory community have been diverted away in some cases from retail food safety programs to other programs that were created specifically to address COVID-19. Declining businesses and lack of frontline employees certainly has posed great challenges to all segments of the food industry. And in addition, in some instances, there were emergency orders that were issued that did everything from eliminating self-service to reducing and eliminating inside dining. And in some cases, there were interventions to keep employees and customers at a safe distance, which obviously resulted in fewer people, if any, who could go inside of a retail food business. So, this is a very unique time. These are highly unique problems, and certainly to work within that situation, we've had to come up with some unique kinds of approaches and unique solutions. As I see it, there's probably three greatest strengths, and in some cases, this I think will reinforce what Dr. Dijak just talked about. that would exist for the collaborative. First and foremost, we are a very diverse group of organizations. We represent, the interests of public health across the board, so all consumers. But we also certainly have a focus as it relates to the regulatory community, to industry. In some cases, certainly academia is a big part of this, and even consumer organizations. So simply the idea of bringing all of those groups together is great. It goes without saying there's far more work than any of our organizations can effectively address individually. Resources, both manpower and fiscal, are at a premium, and so we really can't afford the luxury of duplicating efforts. So I think that is one of the strengths that this collaborative provides. Also, collaborative members have worked together to set goals and objectives using a consensus building approach. And, this approach, I think, promotes not only participation by the 6 partnering organization, but it also facilitates buy-in from those organizations and hopefully the stakeholders that they represent. And finally, I would have to probably say the collaborative has created new and better lines of communication between our organizations. And this information sharing in and of itself not only assures that we are giving the same type of message, but the same information, and hopefully as a result of many of the new channels that the collaborative has created, we will be able to provide more and better information to not only the members of our respective organizations, but also to the general public.
Thank you, Dr. McSwain. Before I ask the second question as part of this, I'm going to bring in Lori Farmer. Lori, do you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to build on what Dave already talked about, which is really these are unprecedented times that we are experiencing. We're experiencing them both personally and professionally. And I'll have to say, all of us have done this in some form or another, stepped back and looked at the balcony of life and our work and said, hey, what is really important that I need to be doing now? And this has been a time of a lot of self-reflection for all of us. And I will say that the collaborative has really benefited from that, because we stopped among ourselves and said, where are the key places where we can have significant impact? And we're doing that. So I just want to say what others already said and add to that our public health outcomes collectively are going to magnify our strategic goal of reducing foodborne illness. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you. And so for Dr. McSwain or anybody who else wants to chime in, you kind of mentioned it already, but what are some of the lessons from COVID-19 that have been learned since that help shape us?
Well, I think, again, the whole idea of we've had to be flexible. Obviously, because of the impact of the pandemic, we could not do business as usual. And in the industry side, they've had to become very creative. And in some cases, it was essential to sustain the organization itself. I think from a regulatory community, we simply have tried to find better and more effective ways to provide oversight of retail food establishments, while at the same time not necessarily making on-site inspections. So, I think our mission and our goals haven't changed. It's simply the strategies and approaches that we have used to achieve those goals have changed as a result of the impact of the COVID pandemic.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'd like to bring in any other speakers that would like to chime in on this question. Okay. Well, let's go on to the next question I have. And this one is for Jennifer Lee, if you're ready. What unique skills, qualities, or experience does your organization or team bring to the goals of the collaborative?
Sure. So when the collaborative members met for the very first set of meetings with the aim of bending the curve of foodborne illness at the retail level, NACCHO was the organization at the table solely dedicated to representing the interests of local departments' retail food safety programs. And just to give you a little bit of background, if you're not familiar with who we are and who we serve, we represent the nearly 3,000 local health departments nationwide, of which more than 75% of local health departments are involved in the regulation of food service establishments and the provision of food safety education. You know, while health departments have a regulatory role to ensuring safe food, they really want to be a key partner and a resource to the retail food establishment industry. Businesses are key to a vital community, and health departments to keep in mind the balance between protecting public health and economic growth and stability for the communities they serve. And we were in alignment that a coordinated approach with the other retail food regulatory associations would benefit local departments working at the front lines of food safety.
Thank you. And how can the audience get involved in this?
We believe that our work with the collaborative will result in even more support for public health agencies in retail food industry. So stay tuned for opportunities in the future to join the Food Safety Advisory Group. As we continue to work on these exciting projects, we hope that state, local, tribal, and territorial agencies will stay informed with the collaborative's work. So please start by following the collaborative social media channels. We are very active on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and bookmarking our new website.
Thank you, Jennifer. And then Dr. McSwain wants to chime in as well.
Well, I just wanted to say that in addition, and I certainly echo the comments that Jen just made, but I do want to reinforce the message that this collaborative is representative of all segments, the regulatory community, the retail food industry, consumers, as well as academia. So anyone who is watching this particular video, regardless of which of those particular constituent groups you may be a part of, we would like your involvement. And certainly at CFP, they're the lifeblood of our organization and the process that we employ. And certainly I think they are equally important as far as the effectiveness of the collaboration is concerned.
Thank you, Dr. McSwain, and Jennifer as well. So does any other speakers want to chime in on this specific question? Okay. I don't, let's see. So thank you very much. So we'll go on to the next question then. This is going to be for Lori Farmer, if you're ready for the question. How does this work tie into the new era of smarter food safety?
Right. Okay.
Hi.
Question, Michelle. Yes. So FDA is taking a new approach to food safety. We're leveraging technology and other tools to create a safer and more digital, traceable food system. And, you know, as we talked about earlier, our public health metric remains the same. So this special trusted team of folks that are on this panel today will know that. It's the reduction of foodborne illness. And so the work of the collaborative is directly part of New Era. You're going to see New Era taking credit for all of this work. And it's so important because what we're doing here is going to impact and really reduce foodborne illness. And I just want to say, first of all, that this group of professionals, these are only few of the people that are part of this. They are a very trusted group. We have worked together for many years. So being able to leverage these partnerships and relationships is the perfect time. And this is the new era. And element number 3 in New Era is really focused on retail modernization. And the collaborative work is specifically focused on modernization of retail. It's us being more innovative and flexible. So much of the work is really part of a cooperative agreement at the moment. And FDA is part of that as well, and so is CDC. So we're all working together. And some of the key things that we're working on are really going to change the paradigm for us. And it is moving the regulatory foundation in this country forward. You're going to hear about the Food Code Adoption Toolkit. That's significant. I know everybody wants to see that. increasing the use of risk-based inspectional approaches, identifying and really looking at intervention strategies out in the field, improving our foodborne outbreak response, and doing that collectively. So that could be training, it could be a variety of things. It could be resources, food safety management systems. This is about creating a culture of food safety in your organization. We're really working towards that and increasing active managerial control by industry operators. So this is something each one of us are passionate about. It is the work of the collaborative that will be part of New Era.
Well, thank you very much for that, Laura. So does any of this, I want to bring in any of the speakers. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that? Maybe including how the audience may be interested in getting involved? Okay. Let's go. Oh, go ahead.
I can speak to that. Sorry.
Sure.
If people want to be involved, you've got associations right here that you can contact them and leverage. How can you be a part? I heard Dave talking about the Conference for Food Protection. That's a huge engagement strategy that we have. Your retail food specialist, please reach out to them on areas that you see you have interest. So there are lots of places that you can get involved. And I think Jen talked about the collaborative website, always accessing that and seeing what's going on.
Thank you very much for that. So we'll go ahead then and go on to the next question. And this is for Steve Vanderdyk and Dr. Brown. How does the work tie into the Healthy People 2030 objectives?
I can go first.
Okay.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
So the Healthy People 2030 objectives are focused on reducing foodborne illness infections and improving food safety practices. The collaborative's work is focused on that too. Through its goals, it's going to reduce foodborne illness risk factors, which means improving food safety practices, and subsequently reducing foodborne illness infections. And I'm excited that CDC is working with the Association of Food and Drug Officials, or AFDO, on the development of a strategic plan to address the Healthy People 2030 objectives. And this plan is certainly going to complement this collaborative's efforts. And I'm sure Steve has more to say about that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the question. I think the one thing that we can really think about is if we look at the last 20 years, we haven't done a lot to flatten the curve, as Frank Yanis would say. We're really at about the same spot, and in some cases, a worse spot than we were in 20 years ago. Now, there's a lot of things that play into that, but one of the things that we haven't done really well is planning. So we set these wonderful goals, and everyone on their own works to implement the goals and achieve them, but there's no national coordination of that work. Recognizing in retail food safety, I'm just going to be honest, the federal agencies can do all they want, but if they don't have buy-in from their state, local, tribal, and territorial counterparts, it probably is not going to have a huge impact. So we really need that level of buy-in and to move forward. In addition, I would just say that there's one other thing to think about with Healthy People 2030. As an agency, I would challenge all of you to start thinking about what are the metrics that we report upward. You know, I sat in your position not that long ago, and I'll tell you the thing that I always got asked was the things like, how many inspections have you done? How many complaints have you received? How many illnesses have you investigated? But are those really the right metrics? Let's think about what are really public health metrics, and is that it, or is it something different? And we need to really start moving ourselves into a metrics that are really much more focused on illness prevention, knowing that all those things may contribute, but ultimately we want the focus to be on illness prevention and mitigation.
Thank you. And I'll add a question to that. So how would the local agencies get to know about the metrics that they should be starting to implement?
That's a great question. Well, I think there's some creative agencies out there that have really been looking at this. So, you know, one of the things really you could be looking at is some of those comparisons from year to year on things like risk factor violations. That might be a better comparison. What percentage of your inspections completed have a risk factor violation? That might be more meaningful than perhaps some of the others. So that'd just be one example, but there are lots of others, and all of you are very creative. Along with that, if you've got some great metrics, I think we'd all tell you to share them, because we all are very challenged when it comes to this. This is not always our first, when we're looking at things, we often are thinking revenue. I hate to say that, but revenue, inspection numbers, and those sorts of things, we're not necessarily thinking about the other, because that's what we hit every day on our management portfolio. So I would just really urge folks, if you think you have a great metric that's working for you all, definitely share that with us. Send it to the contact email address at the Retail Collaborative. We're all looking for the best ideas. And I'll tell you, it's probably not those of us in the room that have the best ideas. It's someone out there that has the best idea.
Thank you, Steve. That was great. And thank you. Let's see, does anybody else want to join on this particular question from the speakers?
Michelle, Dave Dijak, I might
Hey, Dave.
riff off of Steve's comments. I think the further upstream we can go with collecting risk factor data, the better off we're going to be. I'm a classically trained industrial hygienist, and we know that when someone cuts their finger in the workplace, there's probably 6 other people that have done that before a serious amputation occurs. So the further we can go upstream looking for the industrial hygiene version of slips, trips, and falls, what are those risk factors that we can identify that will put a bottleneck around serious foodborne illness downstream?
That's exactly. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Dijak. All right. Anybody else want to add to this specific conversation? Okay, let's go on to the next question then. And again, speakers, feel free to chime in anytime. And audience, we would love to see your questions. I'm sure there's lots of questions out there that you have specifically for your local jurisdiction. We'll go ahead and go to now Dr. McSwain. I have a question for you. Of the projects that the collaborative has undertaken so far, which are you most excited about? What makes you this, like, I want to do this now?
Well, I think we could probably safely say we like to do all of them now, because we've got some really exciting things currently going on. But if we're going to be sort of forced to identify a few, then let me tell you, at least from my perspective, and I would guess my counterparts on this panel may have a different point of view, and certainly I hope they will chime in at the end. There's probably 3 of the initiatives that I see as offering the greatest return on our investment of time and effort in the shortest period of time. The first being the work that's being done to promote the development of a national strategy for increasing the amount of food code adoption by state, local, tribal, and territorial agencies throughout the country. And again, this is obviously what the point of emphasis is, a recent version of the food code. Unfortunately, we have some jurisdictions that may be working with a version of the food code that is many years old. And then, as we all know, science changes and science changes practice. And if you're not keeping current, then unfortunately you may not be doing everything you can to, again, reduce the risk of foodborne illness and hopefully in turn the incidence of foodborne illness. So we think that is one of the things that is obviously an activity of great importance. CFP and NACCHO have collaborated on a couple of projects that obviously we are very excited about. One is in terms of improving the regulatory approach and the competency and the food safety culture of the regulatory community. Obviously, we need to make sure that the regulators who are doing inspections, who are doing foodborne illness investigations, who are involved in plan review, and all of those activities that we know are critical to retail food safety, are competent, that they have a thorough understanding of the importance of the work they're doing, that they're not inclined to cut corners, and hopefully that they are going to be able to do a stellar job in spite of the limited resources and capacity that they might be working within. So this is we think is something that is really critical to enhancing food safety, and we think it ties in obviously very well with the New Era initiative as well. And lastly, we're also, we being CFP and HO, are working on increasing enrollment and engagement and conformance with the voluntary national retail program standards. This is a program that's been in existence for a few decades now, but we think it's grossly undersubscribed, and we're trying to do everything we can to survey the jurisdictions that are enrolled and have maintained conformance with the standards. This way we can share that information with agencies that may be enrolled but aren't making the kind of progress that we're hoping they would be, or they probably feel that they would like to be achieving as well. And certainly we would like to use this as a means of motivating those agencies that aren't enrolled in the program standards to get involved. So again, as I said at the outset of this answer, I think it's probably a case that all of our partners will view all of our initiatives as being important. And again, I think the bottom line is they all promote uniformity of retail food safety activities, and ultimately will reduce the incidence of foodborne illness. But I certainly would be happy to share the floor with the other panelists and let them offer their perspective on this question as well.
Thank you. And you answered that second part. The second part of that question was, how do you see it making an impact? And it sounds like it's an impact in a variety of ways. Is there one particular area that you would say you saw the most impact, or you see the most impact?
Well, again, I think probably just the overall harmonization of our efforts is something that's going to result in a great impact. But probably at this particular point in time, I think the work of the Food Code Toolkit work group and probably the communications work group would be the two that I see as probably offering the greatest result at this particular point in time.
Thank you for that. And Jennifer Lee, you'd like to chime in on that?
Great, thank you. Yes, David, really hit on all the key areas that, why we're so excited about the collaborative and the goals and the objectives that we have laid out and some of the successes that we're experiencing. But just really wanted to echo, the uptake of the voluntary retail program standards. It's really seen as a continuous quality improvement program for the retail regulatory programs. And you may have an outstanding program, but there's always room for improvement. And just in recent years, we've seen some outstanding work, the creativity and the innovations coming through from the jurisdictions across the country.
Thank you. And how would a jurisdiction learn more about the retail standards if they haven't already?
I can start, and anybody else could chime in as well. There's a number of resources. Obviously, you could visit the collaborative website, but also FDA's website. I believe all of the collaborative members have a role in the education, the adoption, the uptake of the voluntary retail program standards. So you could also check out any of our websites and see how we're all playing a role on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. And Lori Farmer, do you have also some input?
Yeah, I'll just add in on resources that Jen already described a lot of them. I'll just say it's the retail food specialist, the FDA retail food specialist that is available to assist each of you in working through what your priorities are, helping you and assisting you through program standards. The mentor program that NACCHO has been amazing in getting people going as well. So having that constant person to talk to and get insight from. So that's it for me.
Thank you. And Steve Manderdak, you have something to add?
Sure. I just wanted to talk a little bit about another resource that's available to everyone is look at your colleagues. So go look at the list of folks in the country that have enrolled and are doing well. Look at the programs that are like you. Go talk to them and learn what they're doing and how they're approaching it. We found that to be tremendously helpful with the Manufactured Food Regulatory Program standards and implementing those, was going to the jurisdictions that were similar to you. I'll give you an example. When I was in Iowa, you may not believe this, but one of the folks I talked to a ton was Alaska. We just operated very similarly in our approach to the program, et cetera. So they were kind of the, who I bounced things off of. There were others like that, but find out who's the right partner for you to work with and to help you move forward in the program standards. And it might not be the one next to you. Always look for the one that's more like you and operates in the same manner.
Oh, I agree with that one. I looked at Fairfax, Virginia, so yeah, across the country. And we do have, since you're on the line, we do have a comment from the audience. Here's the comment. One project for the collaborative to tackle is how to consistently regulate specialized process, ROP, MAPs, etc., ready-to-eat meals shipped across the country, but produced at retail. With no FDA or FSIS oversight. Are you able to answer that comment?
Sure. I'll at least do a starting point. So one of the things that we're working with in the new era of smarter food safety is the concept of new business models. One of our biggest challenges is business is much faster than the regulatory community most days. By time we figure out it's a new emerging trend, we're already well behind the curve. We've got to make that faster. We've got to figure out how to do that well. When you walk into some of these RTE meal kit manufacturers, and I'm going to call them manufacturer because it doesn't look like a traditional retail operation in a lot of sense. It looks like what you see in a manufacturing firm. So it's very different. So we have to get ourselves ready to go. Training on specialized processes, the FDA course on specialized processes. I would argue after you've finished your first standardization, there are 3 courses you need as an inspector. One of them is specialized processes at retail. One of them is risk-based inspection methods. And the last one is managing retail food safety. Those are minimums now. Those shouldn't be considered kind of extra training that happens. Those are what you need to do to be effective as a food safety specialist. Those are just a few things I would say, but definitely in the new era, I think we're going to be making some movement on that issue.
Thank you. And if I could chime in on that, as a supervisor, I also do training, but I noticed that in some other jurisdictions, they're not aware of the FDA trainings that are available. How do the local jurisdictions find that information where they can obtain these FDA classes?
Well, I could take that. So the local jurisdiction can look on our Office of Training, Education, and Development website. There is something called PACLOR. If you're not familiar with that and know how to do that, you can reach out to your retail food specialist. So go on the FDA and search for retail food specialist, and you'll be able to find the person assigned to your part of the country that can help connect you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to go back a little bit. Lori Farmer, you wanted to talk about resources?
Yeah, so somebody from the audience had a question related to e-commerce, essentially, and I heard Steve addressing that as well. Just wanted to mention something that as part of New Era, we'll be having a new business model summit. And this collaborative has been helpful in helping us in designing that summit. It will be held sometime in the fall. We'll be reaching out and conducting a request for information to find out things around best practices, regulatory foundations, concerns from consumer groups, industries. And this is a long path that we're on, but I just thought there was an opportunity because of the question that came in to address it, that it is, as Steve said, a part of Element 3 in New Era.
Thank you, Lori. All right, let's go on to the next question. So I think this one, Lori, is also going to you. Are you ready? I know we're picking on you a lot today.
It's fine, yeah.
So what are some of the projects that the collaborative is currently working on that you believe will make a significant difference in the retail food safety and the reduction of foodborne illness? And you already discussed this in the previous questions, but do you want to go further into the question?
Sure, I would love to, because all of the work in the collaborative is important, and it's what we're all saying. The thing that I think will have significant impact is the work that is with the industry and the regulatory partners. And as you guys know, that's intertwined, right? So it's the impact of focusing on food safety management systems and how we can further drive active managerial control is really going to make an impact out there. And we've already heard a lot about the retail food regulatory program standards and how important that is, and I agree with that. And I also agree, the regulatory foundation part that Dave talked about is moving that is very important. So these things will help us strategically bend the curve of foodborne illness. They will also help us with national uniformity. But FDA is not just talking about this. We're putting money behind this. So a current funding announcement is out for $1.6 million for jurisdictions to apply for doing program standards work. And we really want that movement to be towards conformance. And also our senior leadership has approved a $40 million over 3 years using a funding model to drive conformance of standards. That is unprecedented, and that is recognition that this group can do some amazing things together.
Definitely. Thank you. And that is totally awesome to hear that. Brenda Bacon, do you want to chime in on this question? Brenda, are you able to chime in?
Yes, I'll be happy to.
Oh, hello. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So one of the areas that the collaborative is working on that is going to make a significant impact, we believe, is the food code adoption toolkit. So what we did was try to get an idea of what is necessary for those that are trying to adopt a more recent version of the food code would need to accomplish that. And I know Steve had mentioned reaching out to others that have similar food safety systems in other states or jurisdictions. And I think that's a terrific idea. But with the collaborative website and the toolkit bar on it, you can go in and see all of the work and the ideas that we had as a collaborative to help those along and to use that information in a really smart way to future the progress of food code adoption.
Oh, thank you. And I'd like to put this out to the presenters as somebody from the local jurisdiction. If, like in California, you know that there are multiple jurisdictions and they do have joint meetings. How would a state, for example, with local jurisdictions get to know more about not only the collaborative, but also adoption of the FDA food code? Anybody want to answer that one?
So I can start and somebody else can build on that.
Sure.
How could they know about, I think the question is, how would they know about the latest food code, how to adopt it in the process? And that's really what Brenda is talking about. This resource is there. It's a step-by-step process that can help you. It helps you through the grassroots process of just how would you do it? I mean, it was built around the model of, hey, I'm a jurisdiction. I don't even know how, I'm a state program or a jurisdiction. I don't know how to adopt the latest food code. Here is almost a standard operating procedure for you. So, the collaborative website I would suggest, and also, again, your FDA retail food specialist can assist you with that. Anyone else want to build on that?
Well, let me jump in. I think a number of times today we've talked about the website for the collaborative, and I think that is probably one of the premier channels for communication by the collaborative, and I would encourage everyone to bookmark that and refer to it on a regular basis, because there is and will be a lot of new information that is being added. I did want to mention too, in conjunction with the Food Code Adoption Initiative, one of the things that the work group has been looking for and soliciting are letters of support from agencies that have adopted recent versions. And typically that would be within the last 2 editions of the Food Code, and how that has enhanced their ability to deliver retail food safety regulatory programs within their jurisdiction. So if there are any organizations who are viewing this today that have done so and have that kind of experience, I'm sure that if you would be able to contact Brenda, she would be more than happy to provide you with information about how to provide such a letter supporting the concept of adopting the code.
Thank you. And it looks like we also have a mailing list that anybody interested can join. For those of us that still like to receive mail. So we have a question from the audience, and speakers, anybody, just feel free to chime in. So the question is, lots of valued food safety professionals participating today. How will information about the collaborative be shared with local health professionals not connected with the partners? So let's say if I can, let's say somebody from my staff is watching this. They'll hear it, but somebody from my staff is watching this, and immediately they want to get involved. Maybe they're part of the California Environmental Health Association. How else will they get connected, or is there another way, another form to be connected?
So I might jump in here. I don't think any of us view membership as the way that you have to be engaged to get involved. We're serving the greater community here in a much broader audience. So, we're going to be using affirmative methods to try to get to all those jurisdictions that do have a stake in retail food safety, along with, do sign up. But I want to emphasize, this is two-way communication. The Retail Collaborative isn't what Dave Jijek, Steve Monderduck, Dave McSwain, and Jen Lee think, or what the FDA thinks, or what the CDC thinks you all need. It's about what you need. So tell us what you need. Get us what you're missing in your programs that you need as resources to be more effective at bending that foodborne illness curve. We need your information to feed up to us so that we can do the right thing.
Thank you so much. And Brenda, would you like to chime in on that as well?
Certainly. From an industry perspective, which is how I represent the Conference for Food Protection, I have found that this collaborative listens to all, and we want information so that we can make informed decisions and impact safety with our consumers, our neighbors, our friends. So I would just encourage anybody that can and has an idea that this collaborative has our ears open. We want to get information. We will listen, and we'll mull over that information, bring it to our work groups, and discuss it. So the more information that we can process through the collaborative to get to our end result, it's very welcome. It's terribly welcome.
Thank you, Brenda. Dr. Dijek, would you like to add?
Sure. This program is an example of inclusivity. You don't have to be a member to participate. And that's our approach to giving out and receiving information. The local, or I should say the regional FDA offices have meetings every year. Individuals don't necessarily need to be a member of anything to attend those meetings. I think they're virtual in 2021. But there are many ways to solicit and to deliver information, and starting with our website. And hopefully everyone has access to a website, but you don't have to be a member of anything to get access to that website, to get yourself on a mailing list, and to contribute to the process.
Thank you, Dr. Dijak. We do have another question from the audience. Speakers, feel free to chime in after I ask the question. So the question is, in addition to the retail program standards, What are some of the things the collaborative would like to see happen that will help a regulatory jurisdiction improve their culture of food safety? Great question.
I'd be happy to go first on that question.
Sure.
I'm pretty passionate about this. One is, while our forward-leading jurisdictions have really embraced risk-based inspections, not everyone in the country has embraced them. That's kind of the first step. We really need to be focused on those violations that can cause illness. And the second piece of that is we need to make sure that those violations that we find that can cause illness are corrected, and it's long-term correction. Too often we do it, somehow the follow-up doesn't happen, or the follow-up happens, but then 3 months later they're back at doing the same thing. If we can do that improvement, that's probably the single biggest thing that you all can do to really help us reduce foodborne illness. So that's just one great example.
That's a great example. Thank you. Would anybody else like to chime in on that? Dr. McSwain?
Well, I would just like to sort of tag team what Stephen said. I think there's, again, I hope that people will go on the website and see that the three initiatives that we've sort of been talking about are only half of the initiatives that we've established up to this point. So one of which is to become much more proficient at foodborne illness investigations. Certainly, this would help us both to, again, from that preventive perspective, to identify, contributing factors associated with foodborne illness, and hopefully to develop then effective controls that hopefully would prevent future recurrences of those kinds of outbreaks. So I think that is definitely one. I think the risk management approach and risk-based inspections also, as Steve indicated, is very critical. So, and again, I think also the communications channel, and I view that as was mentioned previously, we need to view this as two-way communication. So if we have industry groups or independent industry organizations, if we have regulatory groups at the federal, state, and local levels that are doing good things and are certainly having a positive impact on food safety as a result of these initiatives, we hope they will share those with the collaborative as well. There is not an intent, I don't think, among anyone in the panel to say, we know it all and we're doing it all. We simply are trying to provide an opportunity to at least combine our efforts and hopefully produce some results that are better than what we may have had otherwise.
Thank you, Dr. McSwain. Lori Farmer, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I just like to, and I really appreciate what was said about, inclusivity and wanting to hear from everybody, because that is foundational here. And part of this culture change and moving a culture to food safety is more moving out of there's an importance for an inspector mode, but it's how you think in inspection. How are we thinking? And moving more into a public health coach, having more of that long-term impact for industry. You're also a trainer, you're a coach. Looking at a risk factor study, conducting that in your jurisdiction, finding where the issues are and implementing intervention strategies. That is the ultimate in getting buy-in in a regulatory association. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. And Dr. Dijak.
Well, I don't want to get into mischief too much this afternoon or be guilty of mission creep, but there are a couple of issues I would like to see in response to the question that perhaps we could struggle with, even if it's even over a carbonated beverage. One is a lot of foodborne illness is related to sick employees that feel compelled for whatever reason to come to work. And I think we dodge this very difficult question. It's often presented as you can't solve it, don't go there. But if it's not this group to tackle it, who is it? And I think we ought to put that on the back burner and really have serious conversation about that. And then we should seriously, secondarily, think about our data for learning and not just data for regulatory approaches. We can learn a lot if we share data, if we have metadata across various jurisdictions. And I think we can do a better job as a country of sharing that data. And let me be radical and say private sector data as well as public sector data across sectors if we pool that, we could take a look at it and analyze that and hopefully come up with better recommendations. All of us are smarter than one of us.
Thank you. And Jennifer Lee.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure.
Just to, I guess, emphasize some of the comments that have already been articulated, but really focusing on the promotion and the implementation of active managerial control is really key. You know, we have a lot of jurisdictions that are working in partnership with their food industry partners to take on these food safety practices in a more proactive fashion instead of in a reactive manner.
Thank you so much. That's actually rounds us off perfectly. Thank you. Speakers, we have another question from the audience. Here's the question. Can we collaborative begin mining the compliance data? And that's what I was actually going to bring up is the data and the millions of reports created by routine inspections to look for preventative actions to bend the illness and outbreak of the curve. And one of the things I think, especially from the local jurisdiction, is we have data, we're using different software, but how do we bring that data up to CDC where it can now be used throughout the country?
So AFTA was actually working on a project related to this as part of the collaborative. We're actually doing the first demonstration project of bringing together 5 states' data, including in 2 of them local jurisdictional data, and looking for trends and really doing some beginning of data analysis. Along with that, we're also pulling together some a white paper on what are the key elements you would need to bring forward if you wanted to share your data across other jurisdictions, and what should you be recording in your system and have easily available? So I think with those 2 things, we'll at least have a beginning point to have some real discussions about how to use the data. And you know, along with, you know, I will say that there are times when I call my private industry partners and say, I think this is what's happening. What do you think? And there are some people that have much more robust data sets than we do in the regulatory world that can say, yes, this is what we're seeing, or no, this is not what we're seeing. And I think we all know that. So, you know, don't be afraid to reach out to your friends and ask, you know, and ask for help when you need it.
Oh, thank you. That's great. Dr. Brown, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I just wanted to just add to what Steve is saying. CDC has also become really interested in data modernization, and this is exactly the kind of thing that CDC is hoping to support and hoping to see. And so we're excited to be a part of this kind of work.
Oh, thank you very much. Is anybody else from the speaker or from the panel that would like to chime in? If not,
Michelle, I'd like to ask a question. Are there any efforts across the federal government, and maybe that's what Dr. Brown was just referring to provide guidance to vendors of software, inspection software, to maybe develop uniform approaches to collecting and reporting and aggregating data that would make our lives a heck of a lot easier?
Great question.
Yeah, it is a good question. And I don't know the specific answer, but I do know that data modernization and the initiatives associated with that at CDC are going to be well supported and well funded. And I imagine that this is exactly the kind of thing that CDC would want to do to help local and state jurisdictions. So I'm going to hedge my bets and say yes, that's going to happen.
All right, so we'll go on to the next question, and I'm going to direct this to Brenda Bacon, if you're ready.
Certainly.
Thank you. And this is a 2-part. So how do you hope our audience members, regulatory and industry members, will interface with the collaborative? What can they bring to the table specifically?
So we've gone through several examples of how folks that are on the call can reach out and make an impact and share their information and provide ideas. So as a member of Conference for Food Protection and being in that role, I was the only industry, or am the only industry member on the collaborative. And I tried to continue to view it from the Conference for Food Protection, but I tended to be asked questions from an industry perspective, which I felt honored to do that because my view of the world is different than other people's views. In fact, I think all of us are very passionate about food safety in our own way. We all are very well adept and experts in our parts of the industry with regard to food safety. But this collaborative gave us an opportunity to sit down and talk about that collectively and listen to one another and see the different viewpoints as we try to move forward and to improve food safety in the United States. So there are, as I mentioned earlier and others, we do have our ears open on the collaborative. We do want information to come through to us so that we can mull over it and discuss it and incorporate it as we move through our projects and processes going forward.
So following up on what Brenda said, we're getting ready to do a large survey of industry partners in conjunction with their industry trade associations on several topics related to food safety, including food safety management systems, active managerial control, and employee health. Key industry folks have been involved in developing those questions, helping us to figure out exactly what we needed to include. And that's going to be coming out here in the next little bit. Along with those associations, will be working with us to distribute all of the information. The associations include, the convenience stores, the FMI, the National Restaurant Association, the Council of Chain Restaurants. So all of the large players in the industry space are participating in that work. In addition, one of our other projects that we're working on is something that came to us really from a discussion with some of our franchise operators. And their concern was, here's the deal. I'm a business person and I don't understand food safety particularly well. But I need to know enough so that I can be successful in ensuring my restaurant is really implementing a food safety culture and active managerial control and a food safety management system. What do I need to know and how can I make sure that happens? So we are working in conjunction with many of those groups to help build a simple sort of workshop type atmosphere that on how they can really go to the next level when you're in that role. Just imagine, I think most of us have been in the inspectional environment, or those of us that are in the industry have been in the back room of, let's just say, a quick serve restaurant. Almost always on that whiteboard, we see what? The previous year's revenue numbers for that date. We see something about the speed of the drive-through. But when was the last time food safety became a goal there? Have all of our employees washed their hands? How many paper? I don't know. How many paper towels have we used? I don't know. But I bet we could figure out some metrics that really would show that once again for the restaurant community, just as an example. But we need to get that up there on the list. The other piece is when you walk in and the owner, what is the first thing you do when you walk into that franchise? Well, I know what I would want you to see you doing. If you demonstrate by washing your hands the minute you walk in, doesn't that tell your employees this is important? It's important enough for me to take time to do this and do it right. So just a couple good examples of how we can collaborate with industry, and we are working with industry during our work with the Retail Collaborative.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Would anybody else from the panel like to chime in on this?
So Michelle, this is Brenda again. Spoke about the impacts that COVID had this past year on our businesses and even on how the regulators operate. Keep in mind that one of the keys is that we all turned out to be much more flexible than we ever thought we could be. So with that, we've learned how, many of us have learned how to participate virtually, which before COVID came, I could not have told you what a Zoom was. I had no idea, or Teams. So those types of innovations, if you will, are more familiar with the masses. So we can leverage those types of activities for training opportunities and for getting information out. Dr. Jajek mentioned ill workers and the communications about how do we prevent ill workers from actually working. I think even though it wasn't a foodborne illness, COVID has heightened everyone's awareness about people that have been in contact with COVID positive people or in households. So I think we can have different conversations now versus how we could have those conversations a year and a half ago. just because we've all gone through this COVID experience and have learned so much during the process.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was on the COVID response team in our county, and I learned how flexible businesses have been and are still being. Thank you. So we'll go on to the next question, and this is directed to Dr. Brown. How can our federal partners from the CDC and FDA become more involved in the collaborative, and what can they expect from us?
So CDC has good working relationships now with FDA and with the associations in the collaborative. And just to give a couple of examples, we've worked successfully together to develop and revise the Council to Improve Foodborne Illness Outbreak Response, or C4, guidelines for outbreak investigation. And we currently have productive cooperative agreements with NEHA focused on collaborative priorities. So for example, we're working on building capacity around foodborne outbreak investigation. So we plan to use this collaborative to continue to work together to leverage our existing resources. So for example, CDC is currently developing a project looking at links between food code adoption and foodborne illness outbreak rates. Those are data findings from that project can help support the collaborative's food code adoption priority activities. And then CDC and FDA do some work on restaurant food safety through the Environmental Specialist Network, or SNET. This network conducts research on restaurant food safety. And the data from this group's projects can inform several of the collaborative's priorities. For example, we've got some data that can really inform some of the work around food safety management systems. And I also think that one of the many positives of this collaboration is that we can use our communication channels to amplify our food safety messaging so we can really have a unified message. So I think to answer the question about what CDC and FDA can expect from us, from the collaborative is more and better and more efficient and more productive collaboration going forward.
Thank you for that, Dr. Brown. Steve Mandradak, you wanted to talk about the importance of networking.
Sure. So as I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, it's important to find those folks that are like you in the community. But, you know, during the times of COVID, when we're doing Zoom and Teams and all those other sorts of virtual meetings, I think one of the challenges our folks have faced is you haven't had that opportunity to have what I would call the over coffee conversation that happens during a break, or I hate to say it, in the restroom or wherever, as you're at meetings and conferences. I'm going to say that in the future, we need to really value those in-person times and use those times very wisely, because they probably won't be as often. But the most important thing, regardless of your level, regardless of what profession, whether you're industry, academia, or a regulator, the most important thing you can do is make friends and meet other colleagues that you can bounce things off of. Whether you're a local regulator, a state regulator, or you're managing a program, or you're in industry, those folks are the most important people in your career. You may not know it, but when you get into a situation and you need folks to help, that's who you're going to call. So start developing those, thinking about that consciously when you get those rare in-person times where it's a little bit easier to do some of that networking. And also think about it in those virtual times. Rather than running off and doing 40 emails during the break, maybe you say, hey, can we talk for 5 minutes via Zoom on a separate room and just visit, because I want to get to know you. I've been interested in what you said during class today or at this conference. So think about that. That networking is probably the most important thing you can do to be effective as a food safety professional.
Thank you, Steve. That was great. We do have another question from the audience for the panel. So the question is, how do we also leverage all the quality assurance, food safety professionals industry?
Hi, can I take that one?
Absolutely.
Or start that one? Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's very important for those of us in industry to be bold. And to Steve's point, ask questions. If there's somebody, even in a regulatory role or another industry role, that spiked your curiosity and you want to know more about what they said, or you just want to get to know them, even if they're not in your area of business, it's very reassuring to be able to reach out and engage in conversations to better food safety, to improve food safety across our own banners. So being able to talk to people and for others to listen and others to provide you information is really key. And so folks shouldn't just participate by listening, they should participate by engaging as much as possible. And to Dr. Dijek's point, we don't have to be members of all these organizations, but we need to have dialogue. So we need to have dialogue at the local regulatory level, regional, state, federal, even with our industry partners or our regulatory partners. Conversation is typically very inexpensive, but you can reap volumes of benefit from having discussions with folks that you didn't think you really needed to talk to, but you end up talking to them, and it's a wonderful experience, and you can share knowledge. And most of us in this industry are welcoming those types of conversations.
Thank you, Brenda. I totally agree with that. So let's get the next one is to Jennifer Lee. What future projects are you most excited about?
That is a really excellent question, Michelle. As you know, we've talked about so many initiatives already as a collaborative that we're ready to take on, and in some cases, we've already succeeded in some areas. But there's no shortage of work to be done. There's a place for everyone. There's a role for everyone, and this is where we would like to hear from you. So please let us know in the various forms of reaching out to us. Let us know if there are efforts underway that you feel connects to the goals of the collaborative. We would really love to hear your successes and or challenges that will help to inform our collective success. So this is your chance to reach out to us. Let us know what's working, what's not working. Our goal is really to streamline and come together for a stronger food safety system.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I think that's the bottom line. It's a stronger food safety system. We're all partners in this together. All right. And I think we probably have a couple of minutes left. I could probably add one more question, and I'll have this to Steve, but I think to the whole panel, what are some of the major milestones the collaborative is working towards? If we can do this as a brief.
Sure. We'll end with a couple good points. So clearly, increasing the adoption of the food code through the use of the toolkit, better understanding what's happening in the retail programs across the country at all levels, so that we can better provide resources. That's a key portion. Improving foodborne outbreak investigations through things like root cause analysis, improving our response to risk factor violations, improving inspectional proficiency. All of those are areas. And another thing with like this event, improving communication with the profession. So those are just a handful in a very, very short manner, recognizing we have about 30 seconds left that I would highlight.
Thank you. And the speakers, you were great. This was a great conversation. I want to thank you all today for providing this information. And I know we're going to get this out to every jurisdiction that there is. And audience, thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Laura.
Thank you so very much. As this ribbon cutting celebration draws to an end, I would like to take a moment to thank all of the individuals who made this event a success. Thank you to our speakers and moderator, and to the wonderful team behind the scenes, including Taryn Laird, Charles Power, Santi Escura, Michael Newman, David Lawrence, Christopher Smith, Anu Parma Varma, excuse me, Anu, and John Marcello. A huge thank you to the teams at AFDO, CDC, CFP, FDA, NACCHO, and NEHA, and a sincere thank you to all of our guests today. We hope this event has inspired you, and we look forward to working with you all collaboratively to reduce the incidence of foodborne illness. Thank you.